Warning. What you are about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
For 27 years, we've been asking, who could take a 6-year-old boy and murder him and decapitate him? Who? We needed to know. We needed to know. And today we know. The not knowing has been a torture, but that journey's over. And a lot of horrible memories in this police department, looking for that little boy. And now I think it's only fitting that it ends here in this police department.
Guys, for investigative mistakes that transpired during the early years of this investigation. Although I was not a member of the Hollywood Police Department when this tragedy occurred in 1981, I am nevertheless a parent who can only imagine the pain the Walshes have endured through the years without the satisfaction of closure of this investigation.
Florida, 1981. Cold case solved. The killer was already in prison. Yeah, you heard that right. A 6-year-old boy vanished from a Sears store. Broad daylight. A Tuesday afternoon in July. His name was Adam Walsh. For 27 years, this case stayed open. 27 years of leads, of searches, of dead ends. And when police finally named the killer, here's the part that stops you cold. He'd been sitting in a Florida prison. The entire time. Locked up, serving life sentences. For other crimes. By the time they said his name out loud, the man had been dead for 12 years. No arrest, no trial, no courtroom. Just a press conference, a podium, and an apology that came decades too late. So how does that happen? How does a case this big go this wrong for this long? Stay with me, because every answer in this story makes the question worse. July 27th, 1981, Hollywood, Florida. Reve Walsh drives to the Hollywood Mall. Her 6-year-old son Adam is in the car. 2 errands that morning. That's it. A school registration. And a lamp at Sears. One she'd been waiting to go on sale. They walk in through the north entrance. Around noon. And right there, in the toy department, Adam sees it. An Atari 2600. Brand new. On display. Now in 1981, you have to understand, this wasn't just a toy. This was the machine every kid in America wanted. A small crowd of boys had gathered around it, taking turns on the game. Adam wanted in. His mother looks around, and take note of what she sees. Security guards on the floor, staff at the counters, shoppers everywhere. Bright lights, middle of the day, a busy store. She tells Adam she'll be a few aisles over, the lamp section. He says, "Okay, Mommy," and he turns back to the screen. She's gone 10 minutes, maybe 15. The lamp isn't even in stock. She leaves her name and number, walks back, and the toy department is empty. Not just Adam, every boy who was standing there, gone. The game console sits dark, nobody playing. She calls his name. Nothing. She walks the aisles, checks everywhere a 6-year-old could wander. Nothing. She goes to customer service, and the announcements begin. "Adam Walsh, please come to the front of the store." Silence. A second announcement, then a third. "Adam Walsh, your mother is waiting." And every parent watching this knows exactly what that silence feels like. Adam was not in that store anymore. Now, take a look at this for a moment, because here's where this case turns. In the first hour, before police even arrive, there was something Reve Walsh didn't know, something she couldn't know. Minutes after she walked to the lamp section, a fight broke out. At that game display, 4 boys, arguing over whose turn it was. A store security guard gets called over. 17 years old, part-time, plain clothes, not trained for anything like this. Her solution? Clear them out. She splits the boys up, sends them out different exits. 2 boys out the north doors, the same side Reve parked on, and the other 2, including Adam, out the east exit. A door on the far side of the building, opening onto a parking lot he'd never seen. Now listen to this part. The guard asked the younger boy, "Is your mother in the store?" He said nothing. Adam Walsh was deeply, genuinely shy. The kind of shy where strangers made him go quiet. A 6-year-old, probably convinced he was in trouble. So he didn't speak up. He just followed the older boy. Out the door. Alone. In a parking lot he didn't recognize. Because a teenager sent him out the wrong exit. 30 minutes later, that same guard hears a name over the intercom. Adam Walsh. The boy from the fight. The one she put outside. And here's the first silence in a case full of them. The store said nothing. Not to the mother searching the aisles. Not to the officers who responded. Not to anyone. Why? Fear of a lawsuit. A company protecting its legal exposure, while a child was missing. And that silence held. Not for weeks, not for years. For decades. Investigators worked this case without knowing how Adam left the building. Think about what that does to a search, to a timeline, to everything. But we're not done. Because now, watch this. Stand where Reve Walsh stood that afternoon, inside that Sears. Look out the front windows, across Hollywood Boulevard. You know what's there? The police station. 40 feet away. You could read the sign from inside the store. Help was close enough to see. Literally. And yet, it took nearly 2 hours before police were called. 2 hours. For a missing 6-year-old. Then it took another 45 minutes for an officer to arrive. From a station you could see through the window. And when Adam's father finally reached the scene, racing in from his office in Miami, the officer's response? Slow down. Most kids walk home by themselves. This child was 6. The family lived 5 miles away. He had never walked anywhere alone, not once. The next morning, a police aide told a newspaper, kidnapping wasn't even suspected. The kid was probably just lost. Probably. Just. Lost. That was the official posture. Hour 1. Day 1. A small suburban police department. No experience with anything like this. And a family about to learn just how alone they really were. Because in 1981, there was no alert system. No national database for missing children. Nothing. But we'll get to that. For now, just hold these 3 facts. A little boy, sent out the wrong door. By someone who never told a soul. A police station 40 feet away. That didn't get a call for almost 2 hours. And a killer, who would spend the next 27 years, as a name nobody said. The search for Adam Walsh was about to become the biggest in Florida history. And it was already too late. Before we go into those 14 days, hear me on this. This case is the reason missing child alerts exist at all. The systems that protect kids today were built from what went wrong right here. We're going to trace that, piece by piece, failure by failure. So if you want to see how one case rewired an entire country, hit subscribe right now. Because this story is just getting started. 500,000 flyers. That's where we start. With a number. 500,000 pieces of paper. A little boy's face on every one. Printed, stacked, handed out, stapled to poles across South Florida. That's what the next 14 days looked like. A family trying to outwork a system that barely existed. And to understand how hard they fought, you need to know who they were. John Walsh was 35 years old, a hotel executive in Miami, vice president of marketing, on a $26 million project. A man used to making calls, solving problems, getting things done. Reve Walsh was building a life of her own, a part-time student, a competitive athlete. Their home in Hollywood, Florida, looked like the picture, the career, the house, and one child at the center of it all. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because it matters to the case. Because what happened next took money, connections, and relentless will. Most families don't have those. The Walshes did. And they emptied every bit of it into the search. John and a business partner moved into the police station, literally, set up in a room, and didn't leave for 2 weeks. They installed their own phone tap, in case a ransom call came. Reve sat through sleepless nights, right there in the building. The reward started at $5,000, then $10,000, then $100,000, eventually $120,000. That's over $360,000 in today's money. John handed strangers cash for gas, just to keep them searching. Helicopters swept the coastline. Volunteers walked fields shoulder to shoulder. Truck drivers spread the word over CB radios. State to state. Everything a family could do, they did. Now here's what the country couldn't do. And honestly, this is the part that should stay with you. Okay, stay with me. Because this is America in 1981. There were no Amber Alerts. None. That system didn't exist. There was no National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Didn't exist either. No national database. Nowhere to enter a missing child's name. Stolen cars? Tracked in a federal computer. Stolen guns? Tracked. Missing children? Nothing. And the FBI, the most powerful investigative agency in the country, legally could not touch this case. Not without proof a state line was crossed. Or a ransom demand. No note ever came, so the FBI stayed out. One family, one small suburban police department. That was the entire response. At one point, John asked how to check if his son had been found. Anywhere. In any county. The answer? Call every coroner in Florida. Yourself. One by one. His response says it all. We put a man on the moon. And this is the system? He was told. That's just how it works. Sit with that. A missing 6-year-old, and the answer is a phone book. Day after day, the search machine kept grinding. But here's the brutal math of a missing child case. Attention fades, fast. By day 7, national media was moving on. New stories, new headlines. So the Walshes made a play for the biggest stage there was. Good Morning America. National television. August 11th. A chance to put Adam's face in front of the entire country. They took it. Of course they took it. They flew to New York. They prepared what they'd say. 2 parents, begging America to help find their son. Now, the night before that broadcast, August 10th, near sunset, 120 miles north of Hollywood, a drainage canal, just off the Florida Turnpike, mile marker 130. 2 fishermen, Vernon Bailey and Robert Hughes, casting lines as the light faded, and one of them spots something in the water. They move closer, and what they found ended the search. I'm going to handle this the way this channel always does, with respect, and without detail you don't need. The fishermen called police. Investigators responded that night. And by the next morning, they were working toward an identification. The next morning. Think about that timing, because it's one of the hardest facts in this entire case. While investigators worked that canal, 120 miles away, John and Reve Walsh were live, on national television, pleading for Adam's safe return, asking America to look for him. They didn't know. They were speaking to millions, with hope in their voices, while the answer was already lying in an evidence room. The identification came fast, and it was thorough. Dental records, matched by the family dentist. A visual confirmation, by John's closest friend and business partner. He recognized the gap in Adam's front teeth, a new one just growing in. The medical examiner signed off. And years later, science removed all doubt. DNA testing matched directly to Walsh. 4 separate confirmations. It was Adam. 14 days after he walked out of that store, the search was over. The medical examiner's findings gave investigators one more critical fact. Based on the evidence, Adam died within a day or two of being taken, which means all of it, the flyers, the helicopters, the reward money, the entire 14-day machine, was already too late before it started. Nobody knew that then. They couldn't have. But it reframes everything you just heard. The window to save Adam Walsh was measured in hours, not weeks. The family held a funeral. And here's a detail that tells you where this case was headed. The casket was empty. The remains were evidence now. They couldn't be released. 2 parents stood over a box with nothing in it and said goodbye in name only. Before they left, the medical examiner pulled John aside. He couldn't give the family closure yet. He knew that. But he told John there was something he could do. Make sure Adam didn't die for nothing. Hold on to that sentence, because it comes back at the end of this story. For now, everything changed in one morning. This was no longer a missing child case. Now it was a murder case. And the investigation was about to break. In every way an investigation can break. Every homicide detective knows the playbook. When a child is harmed, you start close. Family first, then friends, then everyone in the child's orbit. That's not cruelty. That's statistics. In most cases like this, the answer is someone the child knew. So that's exactly where Hollywood police began. And that decision wasn't the mistake. What they did with it afterward was. Both parents took polygraph tests. John Walsh, then Walsh. Both passed. No deception detected. Cleared. Standard procedure. Done correctly. Moving on. But then investigators turned to the next name on the list. A family friend. James Campbell. Everyone called him Dudley. He'd lived with the Walsh family for 4 years. He'd moved out, just 2 weeks before Adam disappeared. And he was at the Walsh home that very morning, July 27th. Had asked if he could take Adam to work with him that day. He said no. Too windy for the boats. He had a job to prep. He left the house at 10 a.m. 2 hours later, Adam was gone. Now on paper, you can see why detectives leaned in. Close to the family. Recent change in living situation. There that morning. And then, digging deeper, police found something else. Campbell and Walsh had been having an affair. For 3 years. I'm stating that as fact, because it's in the case file. And because it explains everything that happened next. His first polygraph came back inconclusive. He was visibly shaken. His second polygraph, no deception detected. He even underwent hypnosis. Cooperated at every step. Eventually, he was cleared. And here's what matters. The Walsh family never believed he was involved, ever. But the Hollywood Police Department couldn't let it go. They had a love triangle, a motive theory, a familiar face. And they chased it. For months. Weeks turned into months. Months of interviews, surveillance, pressure. One officer later admitted, on the record, that they violated the man's civil rights pursuing him. His words? We put him through the ringer. We did everything short of beating him. That's an investigator, describing his own department. Now think about the cost of that. The case file would eventually grow to 10,000 pages. And a massive chunk of the early investigation, the hours that matter most in any homicide, was spent on a theory that led nowhere, while the actual trail went ice cold. Every day spent watching the wrong man was a day the right one got further away. And while detectives dug in the wrong place, the case started attracting a different kind of problem. False confessors. Take a look at this for a moment. Because this happens in every famous case. Men who want credit for things they never did. First, Edward Harold James, arrested in 1981 for taking a child in Pompano Beach. A cellmate claimed James confessed to killing Adam. Said he'd lured the boy with ice cream. Police took it seriously. They searched his car, tested for blood. Nothing conclusive. Then his employer confirmed it. James was at work on July 27th. He passed a voice stress test. Cleared. Then, Keith Allen Warren, a violent inmate, serving time out of Las Vegas. He bragged behind bars that he killed Adam Walsh. In 2008, he voluntarily gave his DNA, ruled out completely. And then he admitted the truth. He confessed to look dangerous, to build a reputation in prison. That's it. That was the whole reason. A grieving family, a desperate investigation, and men using a murdered child as prison currency. But one name from that era never fully went away. And I want to be very careful here, because this channel deals in facts. In the summer of 1981, a young drifter was living in South Florida. Recently discharged from the army, broke, sleeping on the beach, working at a sandwich shop that ran a blue delivery van. At the time, nobody knew his name. 10 years later, the entire world would. Jeffrey Dahmer. When Dahmer was arrested in Milwaukee in 1991, people who'd been in Hollywood, Florida that summer started coming forward. And here's the detail that keeps this theory alive. 7 witnesses. 7. Shown 2 photographs, side by side. Dahmer and the main suspect police had been circling for years. All 7 pointed at the same face. Dahmer, not the other man. Not 1 witness, not 2, 7. Dahmer denied it, flatly. He told investigators, "If I did it, I would tell you. I would welcome the death penalty." And here's the tension investigators couldn't resolve. Dahmer confessed to every one of his known crimes. In full detail. He hid nothing. So why deny this one? Unless he had nothing to confess. He left Florida less than a month after Adam disappeared. He was never charged in this case. Ever. I'm not telling you Dahmer did it. Nobody can tell you that. I'm telling you 7 witnesses picked his face. And that question mark never completely disappeared. So here's where the case stood. 2 years gone. The family cleared. The friend cleared. False confessors exposed. A future serial killer, a lingering maybe. And a lead detective's file, full of dead ends. The investigation needed something it couldn't generate on its own. A break from the outside. It came from the strangest place imaginable. A television set. October 10th, 1983. A movie called Adam aired on NBC. The Walsh story, dramatized for the entire country. 38 million people watched it that night. And at the end, the network did something new. They put photographs of missing children on screen, real ones, asking America, "Have you seen these kids?" The next morning, a phone rang in Brevard County, Florida. A detective picked up, and the voice on that line was about to give this case a name. The detective who answered that phone had no idea he was picking up a 2-year-old case. The caller had information about the boy from the movie. The 138 million people had just watched. And the name the caller pointed to wasn't a stranger to law enforcement. Not even close. He was already behind bars, in a Florida prison. Already convicted of murder, in a separate case. Already serving multiple life sentences. While Florida searched for Adam's killer, while flyers went up and rewards climbed, this man was sitting in a cell. Inside the same state. His name was Otis Toole. And before we go one step further, this is the moment. If you've been waiting to see why this case took 27 years, everything after this name explains it. This channel exists for exactly this. We dig through the case files, the buried reports, the evidence that got lost. So failures like the one you're about to hear don't stay buried. Hit subscribe right now. Because what happens to the evidence in this chapter is the reason this case never saw a courtroom. Okay, back to Toole. Who was he? A drifter, in and out of custody his whole life. A convicted arsonist, a man with a long, violent record. And one half of a pair that law enforcement knew well. Toole and a man named Henry Lee Lucas. Traveling partners, former lovers, and together they claimed hundreds of murders across more than a dozen states. But here's the problem. Police had a nickname for men like these two, the confession killers. They admitted to crimes they never committed, constantly. Why? For the perks. Getting out of their cells, free meals, car rides to point out burial sites. Investigators literally called it fried chicken and field trips. So when Otis Toole confessed to killing Adam Walsh, nobody could just take his word for it. And at first, his word looked worthless. Now watch this, because this is where the case splits in two. Everything wrong with Toole's confession, then everything right. First, the problems, and they were serious. He described Adam's clothing. Wrong. He said blue jeans and a blue shirt. Adam wore green shorts, a red and white striped shirt. Strike one. Then he named an accomplice, Henry Lee Lucas, his usual partner. Police checked. On July 27, 1981, Lucas was sitting in a Maryland jail, locked up, provably. Couldn't have been there. Strike two. Confronted with that, Toole changed his story. I did it alone. I lied about Lucas. A confession that shifts under pressure. Every prosecutor's nightmare. If that's all there was, you could close the book on him. But that's not all there was. Because then, there's what Toole got right. And stay with me here, because this list is why his name never went away. The medical examiner had documented Adam's injuries precisely. Toole's account matched those findings. Exactly. The number, the manner, details that were never released to the public. He described the position in which Adam was found. Correct. He described driving north, on the Florida Turnpike. Correct route. And then, the detail that stopped investigators cold. A wooden footbridge, near mile marker 130, right where the fishermen made their discovery. That footbridge had never been made public, ever. Not in the papers, not on television, nowhere. How does a man in a prison cell describe a footbridge at the exact spot, unless he stood on it, and his timeline fit? Toole was in South Florida that summer, after his mother's death in May, and between July 26th and July 30th, the exact window of Adam's abduction, his whereabouts were completely unaccounted for. Wrong clothes, fake accomplice. But the right injuries, the right location, the right route, and a secret footbridge only the killer should know. That's the contradiction detectives had to untangle. And to do it, they needed physical evidence. They went looking for his car, a 1971 Cadillac. The one Toole said he was driving that summer. They found it. It had been repossessed by a woman Toole owed payments to. Investigators sprayed the interior with luminol. That's the chemical that reveals blood traces. Even old ones, even cleaned ones. Under the light, the floorboards lit up. Front and rear. Blood. In Otis Toole's Cadillac. Florida investigators documented everything. 98 photographs of that car. 98. And in one image, the carpet behind the driver's seat. Officers who later reviewed it said the pattern in the blood resembled the outline of a small face, pressed into the fibers. Walsh has seen that image. She believes she knows exactly who it shows. Now here's where this case breaks, permanently. Those 98 photographs, they were never developed. Not that year, not that decade. They sat in an evidence locker for 25 years. Nobody looked at them. until 2008. And the carpet itself, the actual physical carpet, was cut from the car, tagged as evidence, stored in Jacksonville, waiting for Hollywood police to come collect it. They never came. The Cadillac was sold for scrap in 1985, and the carpet, the one item that could have produced DNA, the one test that could have closed this case beyond all argument, was lost. Not destroyed in a fire, not stolen, lost. Somewhere in a storage system in Florida, never recovered. And it gets worse. Toole had identified a weapon. Testing showed blood traces on it. But during the original examination process, that evidence was degraded, past the point of recovery. Two separate pieces of physical evidence, both gone. Not because the science didn't exist, because the follow-through didn't. So understand what investigators were left holding. A confession full of errors, and impossible to explain accuracy. A car that lit up with blood, and no lab result to anchor it. A suspect already serving life, with no reason to ever see trial. And a family, still waiting for someone to say it officially. Toole would confess to Adam's murder, more than 24 times. Recant, confess again, recant again, for years. Then, he started dying. And only one person went to ask him the question. A prison visiting room. December 1995. No cameras, no detectives, no deals on the table. Just a dying man. And his niece. Her name was Sarah Patterson. Otis Toole was her uncle. And he was running out of time. Cirrhosis. And other illness. His body failing. She visited him twice. Once that December. Once the following year. And on one of those visits, she asked him, directly, "Uncle Otis, did you kill Adam Walsh?" Now think about what this moment actually is. No investigators to impress, no perks to earn, no fried chicken, no field trips, nothing left to gain, just family, and a man facing the end. His answer? Yeah, I always felt kind of bad about it. That was it. Quiet. Plain. Final. On September 15, 1996, Otis Toole died in prison. He was 49 years old. And here's the detail that tells you everything about where this case sat on the priority list. The Hollywood Police Department didn't even know he was dying. Nobody from the department went to see him. Nobody asked him the question one last time. The man who confessed over 24 times died without a single investigator in the room. And with him, any chance of a trial died too. The case just sat there, open, unresolved, year after year, until the family stopped waiting and forced the ending themselves, 27 years after that day at Sears. John and Reve Walsh hired a man named Joe Matthews, a retired homicide detective. Decades of experience. His assignment was simple to say, brutal to do. Read everything. All of it. 10,000 pages. Every report. Every interview. Every lead. Every dead end. Every mistake. And somewhere in that mountain of paper, Matthews found what you already know about. The 98 photographs. From Toole's Cadillac. Still undeveloped. 25 years later, he had them processed, and he became the first human being to ever actually look at them, a quarter-century after they were taken. When Matthews finished his review, his conclusion was direct. Otis Toole killed Adam Walsh. He presented his findings to Hollywood police. They reviewed everything, and they agreed. December 16, 2008. A press conference, Hollywood, Florida. John and Reve Walsh, sitting in the room. Police Chief Chad Wagner stepped to the podium, and he announced it, officially. The Adam Walsh case was closed. The killer, Otis Toole. And then the chief did something you almost never see. He apologized, publicly, on the record, for the investigative mistakes, the lost evidence, the wasted years. He acknowledged what the family had endured for 27 years. Errors that, had they not been made, could have put Toole in front of a jury, while he was still alive. John Walsh stood and answered. He said the not knowing had been a torture, and that it was fitting it ended in that police department. The same building he'd once lived in for 2 weeks. Now, this channel owes you the whole truth, so here it is, plainly. There was no new evidence that day, no DNA match, no trial, no verdict. Toole had been dead for 12 years. The closure was a re-examination of existing files, and an official declaration, nothing more. The family got an apology. They never got a courtroom. No jury ever weighed the evidence. No judge ever read a sentence. And that's why this case still gets argued today. Some investigators look at those 7 witnesses from Chapter 3 and still lean a different direction. Closed and solved are not the same word. The file says closed. The full story keeps a question mark. You've heard all the evidence now. You can decide for yourself. But here's the part of this story nobody argues about. What this family built, out of the worst day of their lives. Take a look at what happened, point by point. 4 days after Adam's funeral, 4 days, John and Reve founded an outreach center for missing children, while their own case was still open, while no one was charged. President Reagan signs the Missing Children's Act. For the first time in American history, missing kids are entered into the FBI's national database. The exact gap John screamed about, to a coroner, in Chapter 2, fixed. By law, John co-founds the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Reve right there beside him. She left school for this. That center has since helped recover more than 360,000 children. 360,000. Let that number land. John Walsh becomes the host of America's Most Wanted. The show runs 23 years. Over 1,100 fugitives captured. At least 17 from the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list. Retailers across America adopt a new protocol. A child goes missing in a store. The building locks down. Every employee mobilizes. Nobody leaves. They named it Code Adam. For a shy 6-year-old, sent out the wrong door. The exact failure that started this story now has a name and a fix. President Bush signs the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act, a national sex offender registry, expanded, federal penalties, strengthened, a federal law carrying his name, protecting kids he never met. The system that failed one child in 1981 was torn down and rebuilt, in his name. Amber Alerts, national databases, store lockdowns, federal law. Every piece of it traces back to one Tuesday afternoon. So let's end where it started. A department store. Noon. Fluorescent lights. A voice comes over the intercom. Adam Walsh, please come to the front of the store. Nobody answered that call in 1981. But everything built since answers it every single day. Every child entered in a database. Every store that locks its doors. Every alert that lights up your phone. That's the answer. 27 years late, but permanent. Now here's what I need you to remember. As you leave this video, this case cracked because one person made one phone call. The morning after a movie aired. That's it. One call. Cold cases don't solve themselves. People solve them. A comment, a tip, a report, a call. So if you see something that doesn't sit right, say something. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. We read every one. And hit subscribe right now, because we dig into a case like this every week. The next cold case shouldn't take 27 years. Help us make sure it doesn't.